I was reminded recently that Rudy would say at the end of the class, close your eyes, please. If that works for you, you should do it. To me, there's a continuity of the experience of the class and being away from the world. You have to end one to start the other. But if closing your eyes feels natural and allows you to complete this, please do it. So I think I'm just going to tell you a story. Several months ago, I learned that friends of mine from London who were in the musical of Ghost are going to be appearing on Broadway together in a play called Caroline of Change, which I had seen before and was not a big fan of, but it's written by an extraordinary writer named Tony Kushner, who did Angels in America. And I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to go see them. Sharon Clark was Oda Mae. Casey Levy was Molly in Ghost. And I just felt, make an effort, put yourself out, go into the city. As all of you are aware of from my earlier talks, I don't like going to New York City anymore. I don't know why it feels as chaotic as it does, as distracting, as demanding, and unnurturing in a way. But decided to do it, wrote them, arranged for something like having a dinner after the afternoon performance, and then perhaps going to another show in the evening. All of that got altered. They thought it was a wonderful idea to have dinner after the show until suddenly they realized they had all these other demands, and so that got turned into a greet after the performance, a stage door greeting, which then got moved to an indoor lobby of a hotel. But while Blanche and I planned this trip, I decided I would go see another play, a musical, all three musicals, because I thought Blanche, because of her hearing, could at least hear the music, whereas in a play, it's very hard for her to hear dialogue. So I decided I wanted to see a play called Girl of the North Country, which was all based on Bob Dylan songs, reconceptualized in a way. And then there was a play called Flying Over Sunset, which is about, strangely enough, Claire Booth Luce, Cary Grant, and Aldous Huxley taking LSD. And I will mention one more thing here. I have been contemplating writing a play about my own life, actually a musical. I'm doing a musical because it feels lighter weight and not as intense as a book or a biography or something like that. I like the idea of putting life into song, and I love the idea of giving Blanche a voice in that story that we have. The story of my life is in a way a love story, and giving her a voice seems really meaningful. And of course, Rudy would have a voice, and all of you anyway have a voice, and LSD has a voice. So I went to see these three shows, knowing that this opportunity for a real get-together with Sharon and Casey would be diminished into something much smaller and given somewhat, like it was lesser reward, if you will, for a very big effort. First night we got there, we stayed at a hotel. Desk people tell you immediately as elevator problems. We're on the 20th floor, and they tell us their elevators are small and it takes a while to get upstairs and downstairs, which can be 20 minutes waiting for an elevator to go upstairs, 10 or 15 minutes waiting in a hallway for an elevator that isn't full with people to get down. So you don't make a lot of trips up and down. You try to take care of everything you're going to take care of. Not a welcoming element in this whole thing. Also, it had a room that, for some reason, had been heated to 82 degrees to arrive at 65. It was very chilly and a lot of imperfection. But life is often that. We always want it to be everything. Everything lines up. It also had a huge balcony outside that you could entertain 30 people right off of our bedroom, and I didn't know why. I loved going out there. I took a lot of photographs, which made me happy. And then put a lot of covers on the bed, and we slept very warmly. The play we saw on the first night, Girl of the North Country, was exceedingly sad and depressing. But sad and depressing for a reason. It was really about the Depression in America, 1930s. People in a boarding house who had nothing left, who could barely afford, if at all, to pay the rent in their boarding house. More problematically, the owner of the boarding house didn't have enough money to keep paying his mortgage. And it was the stories of all of these people for whom life had taken away everything comfortable. Every one of them. The owner of the boarding house had a wife who was now demented, children who were not motivated to do much in the world, boarders who were attracted to each other and then created problems for each other. It's really a story of disconnect. And one of the big Dylan songs was like a Rolling Stone, which you probably all know was an electric guitar song. And here they sang it with a very real sadness to it, all alone like a Rolling Stone. And it just hit me because, as you all know, I've been going through this process of emptying out, and aloneness is a very core part of emptying, spiritually, materially, in every way. We are all moving toward profound aloneness. We are becoming Rolling Stones. And the show, in a way, was hard to watch, and yet it taught me so much. And of course, there was one element in it, a love story that actually blossomed. There was a vision of it from a man who had died, looking back at it and told the story of what happened to all the people, and people who had every reason not to support each other continued to support each other and love each other in a way. And I came away from it with this sense of, man, it's hard out there. It's just hard. Spiritual life is about being strong enough to endure all of the stuff that comes. And if you can let go of your mind and let go of your attachment to suffering and your attachment to the difficulty and the projection of more to come, there is a way, moment to moment, to find your way through it. And in this play, they had a Thanksgiving dinner, which was quite wonderful. And you saw all the different behaviors, the drinking, the eating, the moments of kindness. But really, in the end, what the play said to me was kindness itself was the reality that allowed each of these people in their own way to make it through. Some were not kind, and you could feel the difference. But those who were kind, even though they were very human, and even though they were suffering, and even though they were losing and things were happening to them, their kindness marked them. It touched them. It touched everybody, and it spread through the nature of the play. And I left the theater affirmed in the simple nature of being a good person, not a spiritual person, not a transmitter of infinite energy and awakening and enlightenment, just making it through with the strength and courage of being a human being. The next night, afternoon show, Carolina Change. It's about a woman, a maid, who works in the basement in a house in Louisiana, who claims that the basement isn't even underground, it's underwater, because there is no ground in Louisiana. It's just all below sea level. And she hates her job, she hates her life, she struggles, there's nothing but struggle. Life is really intense. Sharon, who played the role of Caroline, is a great actress or actor. In London, she won the Olivier Award for Best Actor for this show, for this performance. And it's gathering a lot of people to come watch it. And what you watch is rage, just pure rage on the stage, and how angry she is at all of her circumstances. And the play uses the word change to play with this idea of pocket change that the little boy who lives in the house she works in leaves in his pocket to help her. Change is about her desire to change and her inability to change. Change is about her own children who need that change, materially, the pocket change, and who need true change in life, and how the mere fact that she gave them life presents them with the opportunity that we all have to change. But Caroline arrives at a point of intractable suffering. And I won't go into all the story elements because some of you may want to see this. It's really quite powerful. But she does take this moment to go, stop. I cannot do this anymore. And spends time going to church. And at the end of the time going to church, in which she does not explain to anybody what she's doing or why, she goes back to work. And she goes back to the hardness and the suffering with a strange new resolve to show up, to be part of a difficult world. And we watch that in a way she's gone back to a world of no change, but she has changed. Really interesting. And then we see too that having given birth to children who she can't afford to get dentist care for, that they too continue to change. And that each of us who touches the world in any way promotes the possibility of change, of growth, of transformation. And you see that celebrated in the play in a very quiet way. It's not like bombastic, it's like tiny. And what you experience, at least what I did at the end of the play, was this euphoric sense of acceptance. And then Blanche and I, as planned, go across the street to this hotel where Sharon is living. And we're sitting there, and then, quite surprisingly, very quickly, she and Casey arrived, and we sat on the couch. We hugged. We felt so much love from the time we were all together in London. I can't tell you how that survives the 10 years that it's been since that happened, but there was just nothing but love. And we just sat there. There wasn't a lot of time because we were going out to dinner and then to another show. So we just sat and talked. And Sharon reached out and took my hand. And I sat holding her hand, almost in a state of tears. I have never known, or rarely known, touch that had so much power. Rudy would do that in a way, but it was different. It was spiritual, it was dynamic. My mother would hug me and love me, and it was mother love. Sharon just held my hand and stroked my thumb, and I felt with every touch this expansion, that all of the hatred of the character on the stage, all of the love of that character that poured from the audience onto that stage, all of her life and her being was in her hand, touching my hand. Rarely have I had a transformative moment like that. I cannot explain it, but I can only tell you that her heart, her own life, which is a dynamic, struggling life with a lot of success in the end, but her love was so directed and pure and absolutely not mentally created. It wasn't something being given, it was just something that was. And it was, for me, a change of life. And I don't understand it, but I understand the power of touch, the power of loving another human being, and what it means that in 15 minutes you can change a life. You can change a life. And I think we all hugged. Casey showed us pictures of her children. God knows how she's raising two infants and going to the theater every day. And, I love these two women so much, so much. And the hugging and the embrace of the four of us was so beautiful. And then Blanche and I walked off to Lincoln Center to see the LSD play. And to have dinner with my cousin Joni, which was wonderful. Unbelievably expensive, as is everything in New York City. And the walking was invigorating and hard on my foot and difficult, but it was like effort. It was meaningful because I was arriving at new experience. The city was as distracting as ever, but we were going to have this dinner, which was incredibly delicious. I discovered in the restaurant that we were eating in, and in the restaurant that we had breakfast in each morning, that the deepest acts of kindness that I was experiencing in New York City were from waiters. I cannot tell you how unbelievably and authentically kind each of these waiters were, and how that became, in a way, the gift of the New York City trip, other than this extraordinary meeting after the play and the plays. But I just kept feeling this, and something told me that the person who sat me at the table, who was really just someone who puts the glasses down, I should give him $20. I don't know where that came from or why. But I just reached in my pocket, and when he walked by the table, I just handed it to him. And I could feel like his the gratitude, the value, the need, and the unexpectedness of it. And I could feel that I was doing what I was told, which is what I try to do as a servant of whatever this all is. And so in the restaurant, also before the LSD play, I just felt this unbelievable kindness. I've learned in the period of COVID that big tips is important. And so I always make really big tips. And then we went to the theater, and forgive me, but I do not recommend any of you go see this LSD play, other than the staging, which is rather broad and rather dynamic. It's one of the worst plays I've seen. And the thing about it, what really was instructive, is they did not understand LSD. The LSD for them was like going into your past psychological space and dealing with people who died, or meeting situations that you hadn't resolved and resolved them. So it was very therapeutic in a way, but it was not my experience of LSD. And all I could say was, watching it was deeply unsatisfying. On the other hand, I was able to compare it to the other two plays, which had been so dynamic, giving me so much. This was subtractive in a way. But it gave me an understanding of, if I go forward and write this play about my own life, don't do it that way, which is valuable. Having that insight is valuable. Blanche and I managed the next day to check our bags, go out for breakfast, get our car. Everything kind of worked out, even though we couldn't find the tag for the car. And I mean, one thing after another, it all worked out. We had to get to an audiologist for Blanche. We got there at the exact moment with everything misaligned, but everything totally aligned. We arrived there in Rwanda, right at the moment for the appointment, walked in, and had that meeting with her audiologist. And I guess I watched all these forces that try to make you feel it's not going to work, and you can worry about it, and oh my God, how's this all going to happen? It happens. It just happens. And I think what I want to share with you is, one, making the effort to go to New York, even though the possibility of this big dinner with friends was suddenly taken away, even though going to New York was such an effort for me, particularly because of my resistance to it, even though I didn't pay attention to all of that, and we went. to the city, the payoff, if you will, was exquisite, just exquisite. It was nothing more than hand-holding on a couch and a touch that changed everything. And the knowledge that we are all potentially handholders. We are all people who can give that to other people. And if people make a big enough effort, that's all that's required. You don't need a dinner. You don't need a 2-hour conversation. All you need is this moment. And it lasts. And I cannot tell you how deeply it lasts. And I have nothing but gratitude for that. We live in this world that we do not recognize. I'm always reminded of this wonderful story of 2 fish swimming through the water, and one fish says to the other, "What is this thing called water? You ever seen it?" You know, it's so present, it's so available, it's so constant, it's so much the environment, it's never seen. It's not seen. You have to be pulled out of the water. You've got to be lifted out and thrown back in, if you're lucky, to go, oh, water. That's what it is. We live in this. And this trip to New York was like being thrown back into the water. I do not always like the choppiness of it. I don't like the distracted nature of that particular space anymore. The big, tall buildings, the cracks of sunlight that come through. I've fallen in love with the simplicity of my own simple home. And not going anywhere is really, for me, the preference. On the other hand, there is a fullness to life that involves New York City and involves Red Hook, New York. There is a fullness that involves having and not having. There's a fullness that involves recognizing the water and not seeing the water at all. It's the life we're living. We're all living this life. The lesson for me in this was do the right thing, follow your heart, make efforts even when it's hard, and come away from all of this as the characters in these 2 plays that I loved, which were face it as it is hard. And as you all pick up from me, I guess, my projection of the future is not an easy ride. I think if you read the New York Times or the New York Post or any of these things you maybe shouldn't be reading, you get a good sense that the future is scaring people, even intellects who have a pretty good grasp on how things might unfold. And I definitely pick up on all that. And I look at it like seeing the Depression, 2 months off or 6 months off or whatever it is, like people in 1939 have no idea. It was 39, whatever it was, when the stock market crashed and everything went down. Things happened very quickly. I have a feeling that we're going to feel hard times. But these 2 shows taught me, and I think this is the one thing I want to share in this talk. Toughen up. Do the hard work. Show up where it's difficult. Don't go, why did I do all this spiritual practice in order to have to fight my way through the difficulties of life? Well, in a way, that's why. That's why. And the simplest version of fighting your way through the difficulties of day-to-day life is get out of your mind, which will project all of the negative, frightening, nothing to fear but fear itself fears that await you. Bring yourself back, if you can, into a place of, okay, so, all well, and be prepared for the stillness of quieted mind to move through the density that awaits us. This means you need to be able to open your mind. You need to be able to sit for however long at any given time and just let all that noise and all that fear, because mind is both a mental and an emotional state, quiet it down with your breath, with your surrender, with letting go, with being quiet, and use that tool to not have to move through life in a state of anxiety, stress, fear, and horror, even though it may get really scary, it doesn't matter. You've got to get tough enough to make and do the right. You do, and I do. And these shows were a reminder of that. And the great thing that I took away from it was, one, I'm capable of it. I can be strong enough. And two, holding someone's hand who has the capacity to love you. Just love is the other great gift of spiritual love. The recognition that a simple touch for a minute can change everything. And I don't know why Sharon was such an embodiment of that love. I really don't understand that, although I felt her whole life making that moment possible. But each of us is that person as well. We are each an embodiment of that capacity to touch and hold and love another person, even if it's just for a minute. It can change an entire life. Change an entire life. And we need to do that. And if you want to serve the universe, and that's what we're here to do as far as I understand it, if we want to serve it, we have to be available to the other that needs us. And to feel who that is and where that is and be present, and don't think about it and don't debate it in your heart. Just do it. Just give yourself to the other. Make the effort. Take the 2-hour trip into New York City and fight the traffic and do all that stuff for 1 minute of handling. It's worth it. So that was my story. That was my week. It was a 3 days of a week. I'm so grateful that I learned from it. I think life teaches us that way, because that's what it's about, really. I think if you're quiet enough inside, the lessons really register. If you're too noisy, you miss them. Great teachings come through and you don't even see the teaching. But if you get quiet and you get still, teaching is constant. It's always there. It will lift our spirits. It will transform us. But more importantly, it will bring change into our lives and other lives. We are agents of change because we listen to the very thing that is at the center of change, which is the incredible permanence of existence and being. It is a wondrous, unnameable, unknowable reality that moves us constantly. It moves us individually, societally, environmentally, politically. It moves us into God knows what kinds of stories. But our job is show up, be real, be open, be available, and learn to give that which you're told to present to them. It's an extraordinary journey until it's over, and then we'll discussion. So, thank you. Any questions? So I'll go buy tickets to these shows. They're really, they are worth it. Although, I may not have my reaction. But it's putting yourself out is not a bad thing. No questions? Okay. I love you guys. Thank you for showing up. More to be said down the road.